You know, sometimes the road to war is paved with treaties, treaties that are actually meant to secure peace. And man, is that true for what we're talking about today, the Washington Conference of 1922. It was praised as this huge win for diplomacy, but as we're about to see, it basically lit a 20-year fuse that led straight to the Second World War in the Pacific.
So how in the world did that happen? Well, the story starts in a really weird place, the pocket of an American pilot during World War II. See, every single pilot carried this special survival kit, and inside that kit, along with some other stuff, was something very specific. That's right, 10 one-ounce gold coins. And the thinking here was pretty simple, right? It didn't matter if you crashed in a jungle or on some remote coastline, gold is a language that pretty much everyone understands. Now, what's so fascinating about this is what it tells you about the Western mindset. A trained pilot was seen as this priceless, totally irreplaceable asset. You couldn't just stamp out a new one tomorrow. And that, right there, is the heart of our story. While the West was busy enjoying the roaring 20s and figuring out how to save its most valuable assets, a diplomatic storm was brewing in Washington, D.C. And a series of treaties got signed that completely failed to recognize that a nation's honor, well, much like a trained pilot, it's not something you can just easily replace once it's been shot down. Okay, so let's get into it. The first major blow that Japan took at the Washington Conference, it was a doozy. This was all about breaking up a powerful 2-decade-long friendship. So for 20 years, right, Japan had been Great Britain's #1 partner in Asia. This was the Anglo-Japanese alliance. But then after World War I, the United States got, well, let's just say uncomfortable with this little exclusive club. They put a ton of pressure on their Anglo-Saxon brothers in Britain, basically asking, hey, why are you with them instead of with us? The American solution? Dissolve this 2-person marriage and replace it with a 4-person party. Now, to the rest of the world, this just looked like cooperation. But to Japan, it was a massive betrayal. You can just feel the bitterness in that comment from the Japanese foreign minister to his British counterpart. Japan had just lost its special relationship with the world's biggest empire, and they absolutely knew the Americans were the ones who had made it happen. But look, if you think that was bad, it was just the appetizer. The real gut punch was about to come, thanks to something called the 5-Power Naval Treaty. This is where the humiliation was literally spelled out in cold, hard numbers. And this treaty, oh boy, it created the infamous 5-5-3 ratio. What does that mean? Well, for every 5 big battleships, capital ships, the US or Britain could build, Japan was only allowed to build 3. Think about that. It permanently locked the Imperial Japanese Navy at just 60% of the strength of its main rivals. Now, you gotta understand, this was a tough pill for everyone to swallow. I mean, for Britain, they had to give up their centuries-old double standard, this rule that said the Royal Navy had to be bigger than the next 2 largest navies combined. Their whole identity as master of the seas was gone. But for Japan, oof, the sting of being officially labeled a second-tier power was so much worse. And here's the part that just gets completely lost to history. This wasn't just about limiting future ships. Oh no. The treaty forced Japan to physically destroy parts of its own fleet. We're talking 50,000 tons of warships, many of which were already built or were close to being finished. Can you just imagine the national shame of watching your own half-finished battleships get torn apart for scrap? So yeah, you can see why this didn't feel like a negotiation to them. In the eyes of the Japanese military, this was a profound humiliation. It was like the United States had just acted like a robber, snatching away the naval power they had sacrificed so much to build. Okay, so you've got a broken alliance, a capped navy. What's next? Well, the third and final pillar of this new Washington system was the 9-Power Treaty. And this one went right for the wallet, Japan's economic ambitions in Asia. See, during World War I, while Europe was distracted, Japan had moved in to basically monopolize China. The Americans pushed back hard with their open-door policy. Now, it sounds nice, right? Open door. But what it really did was force Japan to give up its special position and share the huge China market with all the other Western powers, turning it back into a buffet for everyone. So let's step back for a second and look at this from the American point of view. For them, this conference was an incredible success, a total diplomatic grand slam. They checked every single box on their list. They broke the alliance they feared, they contained the Navy they saw as a threat, and they reopened the market they wanted a piece of. A huge win. On paper, the Washington Conference looked like a masterstroke for global peace. But in reality, by getting everything it wanted, it created the world's most profoundly dissatisfied nation. Japan left Washington feeling completely cornered, betrayed, and just straight up bullied by the West. This Washington system became a symbol of national humiliation. And that resentment, it just sat there and simmered for almost exactly 20 years, before it finally boiled over in the most dramatic way you can imagine.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? The attack on Pearl Harbor wasn't some random event that came out of nowhere. It was the final, violent act in a story that began 2 decades earlier, not with bombs, but with the stroke of a diplomat's pen.
It leaves us with a pretty sobering question. Can a treaty that's supposed to create peace actually legislate the reasons for the next war? The Washington Conference was designed to create this stable balance of power. But maybe what it did instead was create an imbalance of pride so great that it made the next war almost inevitable.